Texture. Art is life, art is suffering, art is truth. That was the motto of deceased artist Fernando Villas. Fernando was passionate about his art, to the point of excluding the rest of his life. Friends, family, even neglecting his health. For all his sacrifice and hard work, Fernando wasn't rewarded. People found his art odd and upsetting. There was something that disturbed people when they gazed at his work. The odd way that the drawings appeared, oddly shaped bodies and heads, their expressions looked horrid. So they rejected Fernando, and the more they did so, the more he isolated himself. That if he just made the perfect composition, all his hard work would pay off. It didn't. Fernando Villas grew old and found himself destitute. His abrasive personality had driven everyone who loved him far away. All he had was his art, and so he immersed himself more and more. The art was getting more and more disturbing, Fernando moving from using colors to just solid black paint on white. They found Fernando ranting on the street one evening, waving his brush around, bloody wounds on his arm. He was screaming that he did it, that he made the ultimate painting. He was committed that night and his home searched. Fernando had decided to start mixing his own blood into the ink, producing a deep, dark black paint. He then used it to paint what people call his most disturbing series yet. To the investigators, it looked as if the paintings were moving. Their poses never matched to what people remembered, and yes, the thick, cloying smell of blood was everywhere. The smell of old blood and despair never went away either. Fernando stayed in a mental health care facility for the rest of his life. He claimed, and refused to believe otherwise, that his art was alive, that they guided his hand to create them, his crowning achievement. The thing is, even though Fernando was thought crazy, he wasn't completely wrong. He wasn't right, of course. There's no such thing as a living picture. It was in the ink. Small, microscopic creatures that secrete an ink-like sludge to protect themselves from outside factors. These creatures can pretty much live off air and sunshine, but what really gets them active is human blood. It works pretty much like caffeine does for humans. Fernando must have gotten his hands on a colony of these creatures and mistaken it for ink. Then one day, during his raging about art, he must have injured himself and got blood into the ink, bringing the creatures out of dormancy. After painting with the creatures onto canvas, because of the fact that they are still alive, they can crawl across the paper, giving the illusion that the drawing is moving. If that was it, then a report wouldn't be made about these creatures. But like most things, they aren't harmless. When exposed to blood, the creatures, along with the ink-like liquid, secrete another chemical, an invisible gas-like chemical that triggers extreme amounts of euphoria in the human brain. Similar to heroin or meth, it's unbelievably addictive, and the more the person is exposed to it, the more they'll crave it. Poor Fernando had been exposed and eventually figured out the trick to his inspiration, adding his blood to the ink and drawing out his feelings. The things he must have seen, the feelings he had. The old failed artist must have thought it was his breakthrough, his chance to prove that everyone was wrong about his choices. Had he not been alone, had he had one person to stop him from painting or get him away from those creatures, he could have potentially made it out and been okay. As it is, he spent the rest of his life in the mental hospital going through withdrawal symptoms that will never go away. His work, his paintings, had to be confiscated, as the ink-like creatures can live a very long time on a small amount of blood. And they are still dangerous, as even stuck on parchment can still expel the addictive chemicals to those close by. For now, they are vacuum sealed and locked away for potential future study.